Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking about the latest developments of downtown open-air drug markets, heat mapping the east side, and the city's decision to stop funding the Regional Arts and Culture Council. Joining me for this week's news roundup are Willamette Week's Dive podcast host and Potlander column author, Brianna Wheeler, and our very own lead producer, John Notariani. It's Friday, July 28th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. John, Brianna, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Hey.
You guys, I have a question for you.
Oh, no.
Hit us.
As it happens, every Friday, we start off the news headline roundup of the week with a little question. It's a kiss, marry, kill style, but I decided to make it more Portland. So it's a kiss, marry, kill throuple.
Does this mean we have to kiss all three of them or marry all three of them?
No, so you it's just like same rules of kiss, marry, kill.
Oh, okay. The thruple part threw me
But
off.
the thruple means that you're just like, could also marry or could be part of my thruple. So you have to choose wisely because they have to balance each other out. John, it's a whole thing. This isn't easy. Are they going to get along? Is it going to be...
I'm awaiting further instruction, yeah.
Kiss, marry, kill thruple. Florida Room, The By and By, Vendetta, Beulah Land.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I need to write this down.
Yeah, me too.
All right.
Okay, the Florida Room.
Oh my God, this is hilarious. I'm going to go ahead and give you mine. So I would kiss Vendetta, love that patio. I would marry The By and By because legit, really good food. And that will sustain me. I would kill Beulah Land. I'm sorry. I think I just aged out. But I would thruple with Florida Room. And do you see the rock and roll there? By and By food, Florida Room vibe, thruple.
Love it.
Does that make sense? John, you look so confused. Oh my God, is this giving you anxiety or just are you monogamous, John?
I think I have the wrong... What was the list of bars again?
Florida Room, The By and By, Vendetta, Beulah Land.
Okay, got it. I think I would kiss Vendetta. Fun spot. Not where I want to spend my whole life, but, good spot. Kill Beulah Land as well. I never really got into the Beulah Land routine. I feel like I've always lived on the other side of town. Just not somewhere I'd spend a lot of time. No hard feelings. I would marry the By and By because I feel like that's the best all-arounder, That is it's got the most decent food. You can actually trust them to pour you a glass of wine if that's the mood that you're in.
Never done that.
Yeah, they got they got some decent wine.
Wine at the By and By. Okay, that's a first.
It's of the four.
You heard it here.
I would trust to pour me a glass of wine. And thruple with Florida Room because sometimes you want to get a little bit more wild, a little bit looser, but I think they'd get along. I think that
they would get along.
They would balance each other out, and they all like to have a good time, but their personalities are sort of yin and yang as well.
And they both have vegan options, So yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Yeah.
That was exactly mine, John.
I know. Yeah. Now that I understand the game.
Okay, Brianna.
Okay, so kiss, marry, kill, thruple. I'm going to kiss Beulah Land. She's kind of off limits for me too. That's the other side of town. That whole neighborhood is very young and everyone's having fun. I feel like I would be cheating on everything I know to go there. So I'm going to kiss Beulah Land. I'll probably marry the By and By. Gosh, I don't know if this is controversial, but I think I'm going to kill Vendetta. I have had much love for that bar, and I've spent many, many, many blackout night there. But there's one thing I did there that I'm so incredibly embarrassed of. Right after I had my son, I had the biggest milk boobs ever, clown boobs. They were insane. And I thought it would be a really funny thing to shoot milk out of my boob into other people's beers. And I wasn't doing it to like random people. It was people at our table, like it was a fun party trick. Look at Brianna doing this thing. But looking back the next day, I was like, oh my God, that was mortifying. I can't believe I did that. I'm sorry. She's got to fucking die now. Sorry.
So Vendetta dead.
Sorry. Yeah.
The secret goes down with Vendetta and all of the listeners of CityCast Portland.
You're welcome. Imagine it. Imagine it. Get that visual going. You can imagine what a fun night that was, and maybe why also that she has to die. And then I guess I'm having a throuple with the Florida room. That's kind of like been my dive bar since I moved to Portland. So yeah, it makes sense that we would thrup pretty hard.
Yeah. So pretty much ours as well, except to the exception of you would kill Vendetta and you would kiss Beulah Land. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you. I learned so much about each of you. Brianna, you are the wildest wild card that's ever wilded. John, a throuple gives you massive anxiety. And I love it. I love it all. Well, thank you guys. Brianna, do you want to start us off? You're our guest. What's your headline of the week?
Thank you. So I'm talking about Lucas Manfield's cover story for Willamette Week today. So if you've been following along with Lucas's coverage, he's on, like, his beat is Cops, Courts, and Crime, I believe. And so he's been covering not just the fentanyl crisis, but kind of the landscape of drug use post Measure 110. So this cover story is kind of like months of reporting kind of coalescing. And we're kind of following this map that he's describing over, the months of reporting he's kind of picked up, where this open air drug trade moves from Chinatown to Dante's parking lot, which right under the Keep Portland Weird sign. I mean, oh my God. And then to the mostly abandoned Washington Center, which was very huge news. So now that the Washington Center is all boarded up, that market has moved to the intersection of 6th and Harvey Milk. So, we're reading this article, we're kind of following along with, everywhere this open air market has moved to. And then there's this kind of like speaking truth to power moment in the piece when Lucas reports that Portland Police Bureau has bike patrols that kind of keep these notorious areas more or less chill during daytime hours. But that crew clocks out at like 6, and then it's just game on, and it's crews of ski masked fent dealers. So obviously, fentanyl crisis is everywhere. It's in large cities, it's in small cities, it's literally all across our nation. But Oregon has the highest rate of drug use disorder in the country and the fastest growing fatal overdose rate among teenagers. And you can kind of draw a line between.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, isn't that counterfeit pills are getting sold on Instagram and Snapchat?
What?
And they'll be sold as ecstasy, they'll be sold as XYZ, but they're just like a pill that's cut with fent. So I've actually lost acquaintances because of they thought they were taking a party drug.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And they overdosed on fent. It's just crazy. So Lucas went through the motions and like purchased some fentanyl. Yes. And he purchased it from a kid that he said like barely looked old enough to drive. And one of the interviews he did with someone, familiar with investigating drug trafficking operations in Portland, he thinks that these kids are just, potentially part of trafficking operations themselves. And they're just being exploited by higher ups who know that there's little consequence if kids are caught. Yeah.
Child soldiers, basically.
Right? And Portland's been like an opioid hotspot. In the 70s, heroin was huge. It was all over the streets. And for outsiders looking in, it's really easy to look at Portland and say, well, they legalized hard drugs. Like, what did they expect was going to happen? And I just want to make sure that when those conversations happen, I think we need to make it really clear that we didn't just vote to decriminalize drug use. we voted to make treatment options as accessible as hard drugs, which are very easy to get a hold of.
Yeah.
We voted to create more space and programs for recovery. That did not happen. Everything happened backwards. And OHSU researchers reported last year that Oregon has half of the drug treatment beds that it needs. And the state lost nearly 150 treatment beds during the pandemic. And before that, in 2020, Portland lost its only sobering center where cops would have taken intoxicated people rather than just arresting them. So it's been years of failure, despite so much discussion, to address that issue.
Gosh, I mean, I feel like we've talked a lot about fentanyl and the drug crisis and opioids on this show, and this article just pulled so many threads together, and there were so many details that just really crystallized things in my mind. Like, he has this one passage where he talks about this group of Honduran drug dealers distributing fentanyl produced with Chinese chemicals, operated by Mexican drug cartels and shipped up the I-5 corridor. It's just like, oh, yeah. I mean, this is a problem in our community, but it's like also there's a global organization behind it that is making it happen. I mean, this is one of, a dozen little details that I could pick out that I was just like, oh my, oh no. Yeah.
It's like we're throwing pebbles at the biggest shield possible. Like it's very David and Goliath.
I read the whole thing twice, and I'm just like, I don't. It just seems, like you just said, insurmountable. And I trying to figure out, because there's a lot of like, what is the police doing? I wonder if it's the same, trying to figure out the sting. I know that there was talk. I know they can't really say much. I mean, I know you just shook your head, but they can't really say much to the press about what they're doing, because if it's a sting, like they can't be like, well, yeah, see, we're gonna do a sting at 3 p.m. Like
I'm undercover.
Yeah, exactly. Don't worry, we're gonna get them. So I'm just just not knowing is like scary as well, but I'm hoping that's what's happening, that they're gathering information, because I know they have taken some of these, younger dealers in for questioning, and if they're coming in for questioning, obviously they're trying to gather information as to what's going on.
One thing I did want to point out, though, like when you were talking about Measure 110 a little while ago, and like just there are some charts in this article that really visualize the exponential growth of this problem, of like fentanyl seized almost nothing in 2019, 500,000 units in 2021. That's when Measure 110 was passed, up to like 1.5 million units in 2022. That's like a 3-year period, and like the rise in overdose deaths is the same. And I feel like there is a little bit of a chicken and the egg question regarding Measure 110. Like, are we having more problems with drugs because they've been decriminalized, but like what this article kind of suggested to me is like, actually, maybe it was just really bad timing. Maybe this crisis was brewing and we would have been almost exactly where we are now, whether Measure 110 had happened or not.
Yeah, John, I totally agree with you. I feel like this is the same data curve that we saw with petty crime and the decriminalization of certain lower level offenses. And it's just like, what came first?
Yeah. It seems like a lot of like effort and resources are being pointed at the crisis of drug use on the streets. And not a lot of resources are being pointed at the root causes of that crisis: houselessness, options for recovery. I mean, we have been dealing with an opioid crisis for years before it became a fentanyl crisis. So, yeah, it can be very. I know that there's not room for hope, but there are a lot of people that are working on it, that are really trying, and potentially trying to address those root causes rather than just like trying to stymie blood flow from a gash.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Brianna. John, what's your headline of the week?
Mine might have a little bit of hope. I got really interested in this project that is going on to map heat islands around the metropolitan area. There's this project that's being launched to really figure out how the differentials in the way that different communities heat up. About 100 volunteers went around the Tri-County area last weekend collecting heat and humidity data. And, they were like driving with a big thermometer sticking out of their car and measuring second by second how the heat was changing as they move through different environments. Because we know that there are these parts of the city and of the region that get way, way hotter when we have a heat wave.
Question, John.
Yeah.
Who usually lives in these areas? I'm just curious.
Oh, well, let me see. That is populated by people of color and people who are poor.
Oh, that's shocking.
Yes, on any given day.
Great.
It can be
Okay, good.
18
Just
degrees hotter on the east side than on the west side. So this is like a very, very clear line in the sand sort of equity issue. I mean, and the reason is because of the built environment, right? Those communities are the places that are a lot more concrete, a lot more strip malls, a lot more, a lot less sort of manicured parks and tree-lined streets. So all that built environment just leads to them heating way more up. And of course, these are the communities that are going to be less likely to have central air conditioning. These are going to be the communities that are less likely to have ability to mitigate extreme heat too. So the hope is that we sort of understand this better and then can put changes in place in our region to help protect the most vulnerable people.
What happens once they map these heat islands? Is they start issuing air conditioners to everybody, or they start planting trees?
There have been efforts to do more planting of trees in these neighborhoods in the past. I know Friends of Trees was leading that effort, and womp womp, the city canceled their contract with Friends of Trees.
What?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, this was like a little while ago.
I didn't hear this.
Yeah.
John, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah, this happened a year ago.
What? Oh my God. I swear to God, John, I swear to God.
Oh, that would
I've been able, Friends of Trees are always like, hey, do you want a free tree? They're always like trying to push those trees. I was able to, I feel like if I wanted to get an oak 3 months ago, I could have. So are they just being funded somewhere else? Is that what's happening?
Well, I think it's similar to what we're going to talk about with RAC in the next segment. I think that the city had this external contract and they brought the operations inside of the city. So it's not like the city's just like, we're done with trees. But I don't know what that means for the program that Friends of Trees had been in charge of, which involved, I just don't know. But on the other end, Brianna, you asked about air conditioning, and there is this new program that just got started by the State Department of Energy that is specifically geared towards landlords to give them rebates on installing heat pumps. So, it can be up to $5,000 that a landlord can get back if they install a heat pump, which also has air conditioning capabilities, into a rental property. So this is the first time, this program is just getting kicked off. It's, but up to this point, landlords really haven't had any incentive to install air conditioning. It's just sort of their own goodwill. And there finally is a program that is trying to, it's not going to be completely free, but it's going to subsidize that in a
City
pretty
funded?
serious way. State funded, State Department of Energy.
Thank you.
Yeah. The Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program. We'll put some info in the show notes.
Yeah, any landlords out there that want to do that?
Yeah.
Maybe you should. Well, John, was there anything particularly surprising to you that reading this article that you just didn't know about?
Not really. This is something I've been pretty interested in. So I've sort of been watching this incrementally. But if people are interested in it, in response to the heat dome in 2021, the city did create a heat vulnerability index, which was the first attempt to sort of map some of this. And that is online. You can go and check it out and sort of see which neighborhoods are the most vulnerable. And I think that this data collection effort right now is going to feed into that effort. But you can sort of check out the initial map, the Heat Vulnerability Index.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, more headlines of the week. Well, guys, my headline is actually from last week, but since it kind of went under, my personal radar, I wanted to bring it up for discussion this week. It comes from Sophie Peel of the Willamette Week. You guys might have heard of her and that publication, Brianna. She reported, John says no, never heard.
No, I was just going to say something like, fine crew of people.
Sophie's is also a frequent contributor. So she reported that the city of Portland will stop funding the Regional Arts and Culture Council, or RAC, next summer. For those of you who are not familiar with RAC, they're essentially the contracted art bureau for the city. So right now, City Hall doesn't have like an arts wing. So all the money, the arts tax fund, stuff like that, RAC actually manages that. So they manage public art programs and disperse money to like local groups that provide arts education. They even give out grants to local artists. That's a lot of local artists. That's how they know RAC. But they've been doing this since 1995. So it's not like a recent contract. This is like how the city of Portland has been, the infrastructure of the city of Portland has sort of shaken out since 1995. And it's a symbiotic relationship. But the city is dead set on creating its own Office of Arts and Culture by the summer of 2024. That's a year from now. So they want to internalize the functions of RAC. And though it was a sudden decision, especially for those at RAC, because they're stating like, we didn't get a heads up.
Oh.
So I reached out to them and they were just like, we know as much as you guys. We know very little of what's going on. And their public statement pretty much says as much. Like no one from the city told them it was coming. Though if you've been following any of our city arts admin drama, I'm sure everyone has. I do. The writing has been on the wall for a handful of years.
Was it ever discussed that the city would just absorb RAC? Like, why wouldn't they just bring them into the governmental fold?
So RAC is still being funded by the Metro and all the counties under them, but the majority of their funding, like a bit over 80%, comes directly from the city of Portland. So if they stop funding RAC, which is what they're going to do, who knows where the funding to keep up the organization will come from? Now, I'm assuming there's been scrutiny from the city now from RAC has been, basically the city has been like, RAC, what are you doing with all the money we're giving you? And RAC keeps coming with their budget and being like, this is what we're doing. And so since 2018, there's been like an audit on RAC. And the audit it evolved to RAC laying off 15 of its employees in 2020 because they, at that point, pulled some money. They're just like, no, you can't. We're giving you too much money. You're not telling us where it's going. Less money. And they're just like, well, that's 15 employees. Okay, gone. And then back in 2022, this is, I think, like what started what we have now. Commissioner Joanne Hardesty and current Commissioner Mingus Mapps basically put RAC on blast. And Commissioner Hardesty said at the time, and this is a quote, "This is the fourth time I've had a report that's told me absolutely nothing about how we're investing dollars and whether equity that we all talk about so much is really being centered. I find it disappointing that we continue to ask questions about how public dollars are being spent, and I get the impression that basically we should mind our own business because it's a ballot measure that actually funds it." And she's talking, of course, about the arts tax and other, because, RAC gets funded by a few buckets. So the city basically was like, yeah, we're going to be doing our own arts admin. Thank you. But I don't know, you guys. Do you think the city can handle that in less than a year?
Yeah, I do. Honestly, I'm not super mad at this. Because, again, the funding is not disappearing. The arts tax is not disappearing. And if there's a question of like whether an outside organization or the city is better able to administer something, like I actually kind of feel like that's a wash. And the city does have its own arts program that is being rebuilt, and it's being managed by a guy who was an administrator at RAC for 20 years. So that institutional knowledge is still there. I'm sort of the mind that if there is like a contracted organization that like isn't able to explain how it is running its organization, which, from the exchanges with Commissioner Hardesty and Commissioner Mapps, it sounds like there was some real doubt there, then yeah, I don't have a problem with like that administrative shift happening.
What about you, Brianna?
Well, my debut memoir, Altogether Different, is being released by Corza Books in October of this year. And we applied for a grant from RACC to help with our marketing capabilities. And we got denied. So they can burn. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding.
No, that stays. We love a petty queen. Go on, Brianna.
So my concern when I'm getting into this story is that I don't know that I trust the city to spend money smart. They have a lot of it. And they do not seem to be spending it in the best ways. For instance, the first story that we talked about.
Yeah.
Also, my son is in the special education program in Portland Public Schools. And talk about some underfunded shit. Like,
Yeah.
they're going through it. Like, people that rely on the city and the state for funding are going through it. So to put like an arts and culture bureau in there, I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know.
Led by Dan Ryan.
Oh God, don't.
I mean, of course, as John said, there's going to be, actual arts admin folks that have been doing this for years that are going to help. But he's the bureau manager.
I don't know that Dan Ryan has the reputation of being like the big arts and culture supporter that bureau would require, but I don't know him. I only know what he has let us know. So I guess this opinion comes honest. Yeah, that's my concern. As an artist living and working in this city who applied for a grant and got denied, I would be a little nervous about that moving into the hands of the city.
Wow, even then. So here's the thing that RAC has done that I feel the city hasn't done because they haven't been around yet since 1995. RAC actually has relationships with every arts organization, and artists know how to maneuver RAC, like how to get money from RAC. My concern is, that the city might not know how to do that effectively in like less than a year. And to create, it's a bottleneck because it's going to be a ton of funds, but RAC has built this system that people like, and not only that, they're constantly looking for new artists and for new organizations to fund because they're in it, and that's what I feel we would lose is that connection to the community. I'm sure a lot of other people who maybe have been shafted by RAC or didn't really enjoy working with them might be like, good, but could the city do as good of a job in as short of a time? Will we have a misfire of like, because I don't know if you guys know this, but Portland has a nationally recognized public art program.
I was just going to say.
Because of RAC. Other cities look at us and go, what are they doing? That like, look at these murals. What are they doing? Everything's funded. Oh, there's free comedy in the park. Everything's free. You know what I mean? RAC. But it's money, of course, that's coming from the city and stuff. But sorry, so that's my piece. Go on, John.
Yeah. No, and I'm not disputing any of that. I think that, like, I totally agree that those are real questions. And like, I'll add actually another uncertainty on top of it, of what this means regionally, because RAC is the Regional Arts and Culture Council. And I think I am as guilty as any of us of, like, having a Portland-centric mindset, but, like, RAC spends money outside of the city. So, if the city moves this programming inside, I think Portland will probably be okay. The question is what's going to happen to the programs in Beaverton and Hillsborough and like
Gresham.
all of these, and Gresham, and like, some of these communities are dependent on RAC funding. And like, like you said, the city of Portland was funding a lot of it. It was funding the vast majority of it.
Over 80%.
Over 80%,
Yeah.
And so, like, for the specific arts organizations that serve those communities, I do think that there is, like, a real question of how they're going to be taken care of. And that gives me some pause.
Well, I know I'm always just like, where's the hope? But I don't have any for this article. So let me give you the press statement, just a little snippet of what RAC released. First off, big letters like RAC remains committed to serving our arts and culture community. And they wrote, and this made me a little sad, but like we were not surprised yet disappointed that this news was shared without discussion, given our 28-year-long partnership with the city of Portland. Since Friday, there have been a number of articles that point to a city and RAC collaboration. However, RAC is not aware of any type of plan. So what they're asking the community is to share their RAC story. Like, this is what RAC is contributing to the community. So if anyone out there wants to do that, we'll just put a link in the show notes. I do hope that no matter how things shake out, that, our community isn't basically the divorced kid trying to figure out where they're going to spend their Sunday. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Just like, Is it mom? Is it my dad? I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
That's vivid.
Where do I go with my album? John looks like he wants to fire me.
I was actually digging the joke. I just couldn't. I'm just like too slow to like come up with something funny to say.
Oh man. Well, those were the headlines of this week. You guys, thank you so much for hanging with me at a very early hour and putting up with me. I really appreciate y'all.
This has been
Oh
fun.
my gosh. Same. And thank you for allowing me to tell you my weird breastfeeding story at a bar. Almost start crying while I was reading my headline story. And then again, hearing about wreck. Thanks, guys.
That's all for today here on City Cats Portland. Thank you so much for listening. Our lead producer is John Notariani. Our audio producer is Julia Fiaioni. Our newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan. And our host is me, Claudia Meza. Original music by Jenny Conley and Stephen Drizos. Additional music by Epidemic Sound. We'll be back Monday with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.